The moment her manicured fingers tore through my grandmother's veil, I understood Eleanor hadn't come to witness our union, she'd come to own it. The delicate French lace split with a sound like breaking promises, and 200 guests gasped in unison. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I turned to the DJ booth, leaned in close enough to smell his cologne mixed with nervous sweat, and whispered the words that would turn my wedding into a courtroom. The music died instantly. The string quartet froze mid-note, and in that suffocating silence, I finally had what I'd been denied for 6 months: complete control. My name is Laurel Bennett, and until 4:37 p.m. on that Saturday afternoon, I believed I could navigate the treacherous waters of marrying into old Southern money with grace and diplomacy. The Whitford Landing House stretched before us like something from a fever dream, white columns rising from manicured lawns that rolled down to the Savannah River, Spanish moss draping the ancient oaks like nature's own wedding decor. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold, and the string quartet's rendition of Pachelbel's canon floated across the marsh grass. I stood at the altar beside Graham, my almost husband, watching 200 guests fan themselves with our custom programs. The humidity made my dress cling to my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady, my smile serene. I'd practiced this composure for months, perfecting it like the architectural blueprints I drafted at Harborline Studio, every line deliberate, every angle calculated. Graham's hand trembled slightly as he held mine. His sandy hair caught the light filtering through the venue's floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the man I'd fallen in love with at that gallery opening 2 years ago before his mother started her campaign, before the prenup, before everything went to hell. Eleanor Whitford sat in the front row, a vision in champagne silk that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Her smile never wavered, that practiced curve of lips that could mean anything from approval to imminent destruction. She'd chosen that dress specifically to photograph better than mine. I'd overheard her telling her sister Patricia as much during the rehearsal dinner. The officiant, Reverend Michaels, had just asked if anyone objected when Eleanor rose from her seat. My pulse spiked, but she merely stepped forward with that gliding walk she'd perfected at some finishing school decades ago. "Just a small adjustment, dear," she said, her voice carrying that honeyed Charleston accent that made everything sound like a compliment until you parsed the words. "Your veil seems to have shifted." I should have stepped back, should have recognized the predator's approach, but 200 pairs of eyes were watching, and Graham squeezed my hand in what he probably thought was reassurance but felt more like a plea for compliance. Eleanor's fingers, adorned with the Whitford family diamonds that supposedly dated back to 1863, reached for my veil. My grandmother's veil, the one piece of my wedding ensemble she hadn't been able to control, couldn't swap out for something more appropriate to Whitford standards. The French lace had survived my grandparents' wedding in 1954, my parents' in 1982. It was supposed to survive mine. The rip came swift and deliberate, a surgical tear that left the antique comb dangling pathetically from my hair. The sound sliced through the humid air like a blade through silk. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone's champagne flute hit the floor. "Tradition matters," Eleanor hissed, low enough that only Graham and I could hear. "Whitford brides wear Whitford veils." The salt air from the river suddenly felt suffocating. Graham's hand went slack in mine. In my peripheral vision, I saw my mother half rise from her relegated third-row seat. Eleanor had claimed the seating arrangement was a venue requirement, her face a mask of controlled fury. But I didn't explode, didn't cry, didn't give Eleanor the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Instead, I carefully removed the ruined veil, folded it with the same precision I used for architectural drawings, and handed it to my maid of honor, Simone, whose eyes promised murder. "Excuse me for just one moment," I said, my voice carrying across the silent congregation with a clarity that surprised even me. I walked, not ran. Walked to the DJ booth where Devin Hart, who went by DJ Nova for these society events, sat frozen at his equipment. We'd gone over this contingency 3 times. He'd thought I was paranoid. Now his eyes widened with understanding. I leaned in close enough that my lips nearly brushed his ear, and whispered the code we'd agreed upon, cut to Blackbird. The string quartet's bows stilled mid-stroke. The recorded processional music Devin had been softly maintaining underneath died instantly. The only sound was the distant cry of an egret over the marsh and the blood pounding in my ears. 200 Southern socialites held their collective breath. Graham stood at the altar like a mannequin, his face the color of baptismal cloth. Eleanor's perfect smile finally cracked. I straightened, smoothed my dress, and walked back to the altar with measured steps. Each click of my heels on the reclaimed hardwood floor echoed in the silence. When I reached for the microphone the officiant held, he surrendered it without question. This ended today. 6 months earlier, I'd walked into the Whitford estate for Sunday brunch believing I was meeting my future mother-in-law. What I actually met was a masterclass in Southern passive aggression wrapped in Chanel and garnished with sweet tea. Laurel, darling, Eleanor had said, air kissing somewhere near my left ear. Graham's told me so much about you, an architect how practical. The pause before practical stretched just long enough to transform the word into something unseemly, like common or trade. That first brunch set the pattern. Every interaction came wrapped in subtext and delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. When I mentioned my work on the new Mitchell Library renovation, she responded, "How nice that they're finally updating that old building, though I do worry about people who don't respect historical preservation." When I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings to dinner, she commented, "Vintage jewelry can be so charming when worn correctly." The dress shopping expedition should have been my first real warning. Eleanor insisted on Marceline's, a boutique so exclusive it didn't even have a sign. "Graham's bride must have the best," she'd said, steamrolling my plan to wear my mother's dress with alterations. "This one," Eleanor declared, pulling out a monstrosity of beading and tulle that looked like a wedding cake had mated with a disco ball. "All Whitford women have worn Marceline designs. It's beautiful," I lied, "but I prefer something simpler." "Nonsense. Simplicity photographs as poverty, dear." I bought my actual dress in secret, paid cash, kept it at Simone's apartment. The microaggressions escalated like a symphony building to crescendo. Place cards at the engagement party mysteriously reshuffled, demoting my family to tables by the kitchen. The menu tasting where she'd forgotten my mother was vegetarian and ordered all meat courses. The surprise family blessing shower where she introduced my mother as Laura's mother, not even getting my name right, then spent 20 minutes regaling everyone with stories of Graham's ex-girlfriend. Such a lovely girl from the Pemberton family. You know, the ones with the foundation. Graham's response never varied. "She's just stressed about the wedding. Laurel, you know how she is about traditions. Can't we just keep the peace?" Keep the peace. The phrase became our relationship's obituary, though I didn't recognize it yet. The prenup arrived exactly 1 week before the wedding, Tuesday, 2:15 p.m., delivered by courier to my office. Graham had mentioned a prenup months ago, standard stuff. He'd said, just protecting premarital assets. I'd agreed. I wasn't marrying him for money. But this document wasn't what we'd discussed. My lawyer, Carlos, called me within an hour of receipt. "Laurel, this is aggressive. Unconscionably so. There are clawback provisions I've never seen outside of hostile corporate takeovers. You forfeit all marital property claims if the marriage ends within 10 years. There's a non-disclosure agreement attached that extends to any and all Whitford family matters, business or personal. And this clause here," I heard papers rustling. "This gives Eleanor personal approval over any community property purchases over $5,000. That's not the agreement Graham and I discussed. There's more. The document signature page shows it's already been executed by Graham. Yesterday. My hands went cold. He signed it without telling me. According to this, yes. And there's a deadline. If you don't sign by Friday at 5 p.m., it states that the wedding is automatically canceled and you're liable for all vendor cancellation fees. I drove to Graham's apartment, the one his mother bought him, breaking 3 traffic laws. He answered the door, already apologizing. I can explain. You signed a different prenup, behind my back. Mother's lawyer said it was the same thing, just updated language. Your mother's lawyer? I laughed, but it came out like breaking glass. Graham, there's an NDA that covers your family's business dealings. There are control provisions that give Eleanor veto power over our purchases. What aren't you telling me? His face crumpled like wet paper. It's complicated. The business has some exposure. Mother says this protects everyone. From what? From me? From questions. From liability. Laurel, please, just sign it. After the wedding, we can work it out. After I've signed away my rights. After Mother calms down. She's invested so much in this wedding. She's invested. I thought of my parents' second mortgage to pay for their third of the wedding. The one Eleanor insisted wasn't necessary, but somehow became essential when vendor contracts materialized. Graham reached for me, but I stepped back. The wedding is in 6 days. Then you have 6 days to decide if you're marrying me or your mother. I left him standing in his doorway and drove straight to Simone's apartment. That night, over wine and rage, I made a decision. If Eleanor wanted to play games with contracts and control, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. I wasn't some debutante she could manipulate. I was an architect. I built things. And I was about to build Eleanor Whitford a trap. Wednesday morning, 7:45 a.m. I sat across from Alma Rios in a coffee shop 2 towns over from Savannah. She didn't look like a forensic bookkeeper who'd helped expose a senator's campaign finance violations. She looked like someone's grandmother, complete with reading glasses on a beaded chain. That was her superpower. I need you to follow money, I said, sliding a folder across the table. Wedding vendor payments, a family foundation, and a prenup that smells like extortion. Alma flipped through the papers, her expression never changing. The Whitford family, maritime shipping, old money trying to hide new problems. She looked up. This won't be cheap. I've got savings. And it might get ugly. It already is. She named her price. I agreed without negotiating. By noon, she'd already sent me her first findings. Nicholas Parr from Cypress & Parr met me at 1 p.m. in his office overlooking River Street. Unlike the white shoe firms the Whitfords used, Nicholas's practice handled whistleblower cases and employment disputes, real fights, not country club negotiations. The prenup is borderline fraudulent, he said after reviewing everything. The substitution alone could void it, but we need more. If there's financial misconduct underlying this, that's our leverage. How much more? Enough to make Eleanor Whitford back down. These society types hate 2 things: losing money and losing face. We need to threaten both. By Thursday, Alma had uncovered the first layer. The Whitford Legacy Foundation, Eleanor's personal charity project, showed unusual activity. Payments to wedding vendors. My wedding vendors ran through the foundation, then reimbursed from another account. Tax-deductible donations funding a private wedding. Federal crime territory. There's more. Alma said over encrypted phone at 11:30 p.m. The foundation has been making quarterly payments to Whitford Maritime Holdings, labeled as investment management fees. But Whitford Maritime doesn't manage investments. What do they manage? According to these invoices, nothing that matches the payment amounts. I need another day. Friday brought the avalanche. Alma found it in Graham's name on corporate documents short-term loans from Whitford Maritime to cover what appeared to be margin calls on investments gone bad. The collateral interesting, life insurance policies, trust fund distributions, and this was the piece that made my hands shake: wedding insurance policies with inflated valuations. They're using your wedding as a financial instrument, Nicholas explained, spreading papers across his conference table. If you sign this prenup with its NDA provision, you can't discuss any of this. If you don't sign and the wedding is canceled, they collect on insurance policies that list change of circumstances as covered events. They're betting against my wedding. They're hedging. Eleanor wins either way. You sign. She controls you and protects the family secrets. You don't sign. They collect enough insurance money to cover Graham's investment losses. I stared at the papers. Bank transfers, foundation records, insurance documents, the vendors she's been controlling them through the foundation. Alma pulled out her tablet. Every vendor you hired independently received a call from the foundation offering sponsorship opportunities. Those who accepted got donations, those who didn't. She played an audio file from her phone. Eleanor's voice, crystal clear. I understand you do wonderful work for the hospital charity auction. Dear, it would be such a shame if the foundation had to reconsider its support. Now, about the flower arrangements for Saturday, you'll use white roses, not the peonies she ordered. The florist recorded this. After Eleanor threatened to destroy her business, yes, she's willing to testify. By Friday night, I had sworn affidavits from 6 vendors, the caterer who'd been forced to change the menu, the photographer told to delete unflattering angles of Eleanor, the band leader pressured to play Eleanor's society friends' requests over our playlist. Each one had kept records, emails, recordings, small business owners protecting themselves against a powerful family. Nicholas had everything organized into neat folders. We can file Monday morning, fraud, tortious interference, conspiracy, racketeering if we want to go federal with the foundation issues. I don't want to file Monday. He raised an eyebrow. I want to serve her tomorrow, at the wedding, publicly. That's irregular? So is using a wedding as a financial weapon. Nicholas leaned back. You understand what you're proposing. You'll burn every bridge to that family, Graham included. I thought of Graham signing that prenup without telling me, of his endless capitulations, of keeping the peace while his mother waged war. Then I'll bring matches. Saturday morning, 3 a.m. I sat in my hotel room with everything spread across the bed. Bank records, emails, contracts, recordings. Alma had created a presentation 6 slides that told the whole story in brutal efficiency. Nicholas had the service papers ready, a process server on standby. I picked up my phone and texted Devin the DJ. Blackbird protocol is live. Projector ready. His response came immediately. Equipment tested twice. Marta has the laptop. We're good. I looked at my wedding dress hanging on the door. My grandmother's veil beside it on the dresser. In 5 hours. I'd either be married or in the middle of the most spectacular wedding implosion in Savannah society history. I picked up the veil, running my fingers across the delicate lace. Eleanor thought tradition mattered. She was about to learn that some traditions like justice mattered more than others. Saturday morning, 9 a.m. The war room was my hotel suite. Simone arrived first with coffee and a grim determination that reminded me why she'd been my ride or die since college. Devin came next, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, followed by Marta Keene, the venue manager who'd watched Eleanor bulldoze dozens of brides and was quietly thrilled to be part of the resistance. Walk me through it again, I said, standing before the mirror while Simone pinned my hair. Devin opened his laptop. The moment you say, cut to Blackbird. I kill all audio, everything, the quartet, the ambient mics, the recorded tracks. Dead silence. The projector, Marta held up a remote. Hidden behind the floral arrangement on the east wall, the laptops in a locked cart labeled AV equipment, do not touch. I have the only key. The presentation is loaded, tested 3 times this morning. If Eleanor tries to interfere, security has been briefed that only you and I have authority over venue equipment today. I've put it in writing, copied to their supervisor. I turned to Simone, the backup veil. She patted the garment bag, hidden in the bridal suite closet, behind the extra chairs. If she somehow sabotages the first one before the ceremony, we're covered. Speaking of sabotage, Devin pulled out a small wireless mic. This is your insurance. Clips inside your bouquet. If the handheld fails or someone tries to cut your mic, This feeds directly to my board. You'll stay live. The cake table. Second mic underneath. Voice activated. If you need to speak from there, you're covered. I looked at the team I'd assembled. Nicholas. Simone checked her phone. He's at the coffee shop 2 blocks away with the process server. They'll enter through the service door at your signal. Papers are ready: civil fraud, tortious interference, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. The works. Alma. Monitoring remotely. She has screen recording software running and will capture anything Eleanor says or does after service. Every threat, every lie, all admissible. I pulled out printed pages from my bag. Vendor statements, one for each of them. After the explosion, I want them to know they're free from Eleanor's control. Marta took them. I'll distribute these personally during the chaos. Graham doesn't know nothing. The word tasted bitter. He texted at 7 asking if I was excited. I said yes. Technically true, I am excited to end this nightmare. Devin started packing his equipment. The slideshow is brutal. Laurel, those bank records, the emails, that voicemail, you sure you want all 200 guests to see this? Eleanor chose the guest list. 3/4 are her society friends, her business partners, her weapons. Let them see who they've been enabling. And if Graham stands by her, I thought of the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd quoted Neruda on our second date, who'd designed a reading nook in his apartment just for me, who'd promised we'd face everything together. That man had been slowly strangled by his mother's leash. Then I'll know I'm dodging a bullet, not losing a husband. By 11 a.m., we were in position. I sat in the bridal suite while my mother, finally promoted to her rightful place in the preparation, helped with my makeup. She didn't know the full plan, but she knew enough. "You're sure about this?" she asked, her hands steady despite the concern in her eyes. She tore Grandma's veil. I mean all of it. The boy chose his side when he signed those papers behind my back. My father knocked and entered, looking uncomfortable in his tux. "Eleanor's asking about the photographer. Says she wants to review the shot list. Tell her the photographer is following my instructions. Period." He grinned. "With pleasure." At noon, Nicholas texted, "In position. Server is ready. Good hunting." 12:30 p.m. Marta reported, "Eleanor just tried to change the processional order. I told her it was locked per contract. She's furious but backing down." 1 p.m. The guests began arriving. I watched from the window as Savannah's elite filed in: judges, state senators, old money matriarchs who lunched with Eleanor every Wednesday. They had no idea they were walking into a courtroom. 1:45 p.m. Simone returned from reconnaissance. "Eleanor's holding court in the garden, telling everyone about the improvements she made to your simple wedding." She actually used air quotes. The projector. Tested once more. Perfect resolution. Those bank records will be crystal clear. 2 p.m. Final preparations. I stood before the full-length mirror. My grandmother's veil secured with the antique comb. The dress my choice, my purchase. My secret fit perfectly. Simple. Elegant. Nothing like the monstrosity Eleanor had selected. Devin's voice crackled through Simone's phone. "Audio check. Both mics are hot. Projector responsive. Laptop secure." I picked up my bouquet white peonies, not Eleanor's demanded roses, with the tiny mic nestled invisibly among the stems. "Laurel." Simone touched my shoulder. "You can still just leave. Walk out. Drive away. Ghost them all. And let her win. Let her do this to another woman, Graham's next girlfriend, or the one after that." I shook my head. "Eleanor Whitford thinks she owns this town, owns her son, tried to own me. She's about to learn that some things can't be bought, controlled, or torn apart." 2:20 p.m. The string quartet began the prelude. Through the door, I heard the rustle of guests taking their seats. In 10 minutes, I'd walk down that aisle toward either a wedding or a war. My phone buzzed. "Graham, can't wait to call you my wife." Mom says you look beautiful." I didn't respond. In less than an hour, he'd understand that his mother had seen me clearly for the first time as an opponent, not a victim, and she'd badly underestimated what an architect could build when given the right motivation. The processional music swelled. Simone squeezed my hand. "Ready?" I thought of Eleanor's words. Tradition matters. She was right. The tradition of justice, of truth, of standing up to bullies, those traditions mattered more than all the Whitford money in the world. "Let's go end this properly." 2:30 p.m., and the processional music began. I stood behind the closed doors of the bridal suite, watching through a crack as my bridesmaids filed down the aisle. Eleanor had positioned herself in the front row, wearing a dress that could have been mistaken for a wedding gown in certain light ivory with champagne undertones, elaborate beading. The photographer she'd approved was positioned exactly where she'd instructed, ensuring she'd be in every altar shot. My father appeared beside me, his jaw tight. "There's been a change." "Let me guess." "Eleanor says Whitford tradition requires the mother of the groom to give a blessing before the bride enters. She's already at the microphone." Through the door, I heard Eleanor's voice, that honeyed poison flowing over the assembled guests. Such a joy to welcome someone new into our family traditions. As many of you know, the Whitford family has been part of Savannah society for 6 generations. 5 minutes of this," my father muttered. "She's giving a genealogy lecture." I watched Graham standing at the altar, hands clasped, that practiced smile he wore like armor at his mother's events. He didn't look like a man about to marry the love of his life. He looked like an actor hitting his marks. Eleanor continued, "And of course, we've prepared special touches to help our dear Laurel understand the weight of the legacy she's joining." Special touches. I thought of the vendors she'd bullied, the contracts she'd manipulated, the prenup waiting like a trap. Finally, Eleanor surrendered the microphone, but not before one last dig. "We do hope Laurel appreciates everything that's been done to elevate this day to Whitford standards." The doors opened. 200 faces turned. The string quartet shifted into the traditional processional. My father offered his arm, his hand steady and warm. "You sure about this?" he whispered. "Watch and see." We walked slowly, each step measured. I kept my eyes forward, not on Graham, but on Eleanor. She was studying my dress with barely concealed displeasure. It wasn't the one she'd selected. Score 1 for the rebellion. Halfway down the aisle, she stood. My father's arm tensed. The quartet hesitated for half a beat. The guests murmured. "Just a small adjustment," Eleanor announced, stepping into the aisle. "The veil seems to have shifted." She moved toward me with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. Her hands reached up those perfectly manicured talons that had signed so many threatening letters to vendors, that had written checks to control my wedding, that had pushed Graham to sign that prenup. "Allow me," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "After all, I've done this for 3 Whitford brides before you." Her fingers found the comb. For a moment, she pretended to adjust it, her eyes meeting mine with triumphant malice. Then, with a motion that looked accidental but was anything but, she yanked. The rip was audible throughout the venue, antique French lace tearing like paper. My grandmother's veil, worn by 3 generations of Bennett women, destroyed in seconds. The comb hung pathetically from a few remaining threads. Gasps erupted. Someone's program fluttered to the floor. The photographer Eleanor had positioned captured everything, not realizing he was documenting evidence. "Oh dear," Eleanor said, her voice dripping false concern. "These old things are so fragile. Good thing I have a replacement." She actually snapped her fingers at someone in the second row, who produced a veil, presumably the Whitford veil she'd been planning to force on me all along. Graham stood frozen at the altar, not moving to help, not speaking up, just standing there like he always did when his mother performed her cruelties. I raised my hand slowly. stopping Eleanor mid-reach for the replacement veil. Without breaking eye contact, I carefully removed the ruined lace from my hair, folded it with deliberate precision, and handed it to my father. "Hold this, please. Evidence." Eleanor's smile flickered. "Evidence, dear. It was an accident." I turned and walked toward the DJ booth. Not running, not rushing. Each step echoed in the sudden silence. Devin saw me coming, his hand already on the audio board. I leaned in close, my voice steady and clear. Cut to Blackbird. The effect was immediate and total. The string quartet's bows froze mid-note. The recorded ambient music Devin had been layering underneath vanished. The only sounds were the distant cry of gulls and the collective intake of breath from 200 guests. I straightened, smoothed my dress, and walked back to the altar. Graham's face had gone pale. Eleanor's perfect composure finally showed cracks, her jaw tight, her hands clenched. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected tears, submission, or at worst, a private confrontation later. She hadn't expected war. The microphone sat in Reverend Michael's hand. He offered it to me without my asking, something in my expression warning him not to interfere. I took it, feeling its weight, testing the levels with a gentle tap. The sound echoed through the silent venue. Then I turned to face the assembled cream of Savannah society. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying clear and strong through the speakers. "I need to share something with you before we proceed. Something about traditions, family values, and the true nature of the union you've come to witness." Eleanor stepped forward. "Laurel, dear, perhaps we should—" "Sit down, Eleanor." The command in my voice surprised everyone, including me. But more surprising was that Eleanor, after a moment of shocked stillness, actually sat. "You see," I continued, turning back to the guests, "I've learned a great deal about the Whitford family traditions in the past 6 months. About what it means to marry into what you call old Savannah society. And I think you all deserve to know exactly what kind of traditions we're really talking about." I clicked the small remote Marta had slipped me, and the projector hummed to life behind the floral arrangements. The first slide appeared on the white wall behind the altar, a bank statement showing the Whitford Legacy Foundation, Eleanor's charitable organization. "Let's talk about charity, shall we?" The microphone felt steady in my hand as 200 of Savannah's elite sat frozen in their chairs. Behind me, the first slide glowed on the wall, the Whitford Legacy Foundation's transaction history, every damning number crystal clear. "The Whitford Legacy Foundation," I said, my voice carrying across the silent venue. "A 501c3 charitable organization dedicated to supporting local businesses and community development." "Admirable, isn't it?" Eleanor half rose from her seat. "This is highly inappropriate. Sit down." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You wanted to talk about traditions. Let's talk about them." I clicked to the next slide. Vendor payments, highlighted in yellow. In the past 3 months, the foundation has made interesting donations. $20,000 to Marceline's Boutique, $15,000 to Premier Catering, $10,000 to Savannah Strings Quartet. Charitable giving to businesses that just happened to be handling a wedding. My wedding. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Judge Harrison in the third row leaned forward, his legal mind clearly engaged. But here's where it gets interesting. Click. The next slide showed wire transfers. These donations were reimbursed from another account within 48 hours. The foundation claimed tax deductions for charitable giving while being repaid in full. That's tax fraud, for those keeping score. "You can't prove," Eleanor started. "Actually, I can." I clicked again. Email screenshots filled the wall. "These are communications between Eleanor Whitford and various vendors. Let me read one from Tuesday. Your cooperation with the adjusted arrangements is appreciated. The foundation's continued support depends on discretion." Graham finally found his voice. "Laurel, stop this. We can discuss this privately." "Like you discussed the prenup privately," I turned to him, and even from 20 feet away, I saw him flinch. The one you signed without telling me, the one with provisions that would make me Eleanor's financial hostage. Click. The prenup's signature page appeared, Graham's name clearly visible. Dated 5 days ago. But we're not done with the foundation yet. Another click brought up a complex flowchart. These charitable donations weren't just controlling my wedding, they were covering something else. Quarterly payments to Whitford Maritime Holdings, labeled as investment management fees. Except Whitford Maritime doesn't manage investments. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were silent, rapt, watching Savannah royalty get dissected in real time. What Whitford Maritime does have are short-term loans, significant ones, in Graham's name. Click. Loan documents, with numbers that made several guests gasp. Margin calls on failed investments, covered by creative financing that included "This is my favorite part" wedding insurance policies with mysteriously inflated valuations. I turned to Eleanor. You weren't just controlling my wedding. You were using it as collateral. Lies. Eleanor stood, her composure finally shattered. You're a nobody from nowhere trying to destroy our family's reputation with fabrications. Am I? I held up my phone and pressed play. Eleanor's voice filled the venue through the sound system. I understand you do wonderful work for the hospital charity auction. Dear, it would be such a shame if the foundation had to reconsider its support. Now, about the flower arrangements for Saturday, you'll use white roses, not the peonies she ordered. The recording ended. Eleanor's face had gone from red to white. That was Tuesday, 3:47 p.m. Recorded by Pemberton Florals after Eleanor threatened to destroy their business if they didn't comply with her demands. I clicked to the final slide, a summary of the evidence, with totals at the bottom: tax fraud, wire fraud, extortion, insurance fraud. The numbers were staggering. Every vendor who stood up to Eleanor has provided sworn affidavits. Every transaction has been documented. Every threat recorded. I turned back to the audience. This is the Whitford tradition. This is the family I was supposed to marry into. This is what Eleanor meant when she said tradition matters. The venue erupted. Guests pulled out phones. Someone near the back was already on a call that sounded suspiciously legal in nature. The photographer, not Eleanor's approved one, but the second one I'd hired secretly, was capturing every moment. Eleanor grabbed for the microphone. These are lies, manipulations. She's trying to extort our family. I stepped back, letting her rant into dead air. Devon had cut her mic feed the moment she touched it. Only mine was live, the backup in my bouquet still transmitting. There's more, I said, my voice cutting through Eleanor's muted fury. A prenuptial agreement designed to silence me, with an NDA that would prevent me from ever speaking about Whitford family business. If I had signed it, everything I just showed you would have been buried forever. I looked at Graham, standing at the altar like a statue. This is your moment. Choose, your mother or the truth. He looked between Eleanor and me, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Then, finally, inevitably, he walked to his mother's side. Family stands together, he said weakly. Yes, I agreed. It does, which is why my family helped me gather every piece of evidence, why my father held my grandmother's ruined veil as evidence, why my mother supported me even when she didn't know the full plan. I raised the microphone one last time. I came here today wearing my grandmother's veil, planning to marry the man I loved. Eleanor Whitford destroyed that veil, just as she's destroyed vendors' livelihoods, manipulated charitable funds, and corrupted what should have been a day of joy. But she taught me something valuable. I looked directly at Eleanor, whose face was now a mask of fury and fear. She taught me that tradition does matter, the tradition of justice, the tradition of truth, the tradition of standing up to bullies, no matter how much money they have or how many people they control. The service door opened. Nicholas Parr entered with a man in a dark suit carrying a leather portfolio. Eleanor Whitford, I said clearly, you're about to be served. The process server moved through the stunned crowd with practiced efficiency. Eleanor stood frozen as he approached, her carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. The leather portfolio in his hands might as well have been a weapon. "Eleanor Catherine Whitford." His voice was professionally neutral. "Don't you dare," she started, but he was already extending the papers. "You are being served with civil complaints for fraud, tortious interference with contract, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. You have 20 days to respond." The papers touched her hand. "Legal service completed." The photographer I'd hired captured the moment. Eleanor Whitford, society matriarch, being served at her son's wedding while 200 of Savannah's elite watched. Nicholas Parr stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "Mrs. Whitford, I recommend you contact your attorney immediately. The complaints have also been filed with the State Insurance Commission and the IRS regarding the Foundation's activities." Eleanor's legs seemed to give way. She sank into her chair, the legal papers crumpling in her grip. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked her age, every one of her 62 years etched in the lines of shock on her face. Graham finally moved, kneeling beside his mother. "This is insane, Laurel. You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly." I kept the microphone steady. "I understand that you signed that prenup 5 days ago without telling me. I understand that you knew about the insurance policies. I understand that you chose to let your mother destroy my grandmother's veil rather than stand up to her. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple." I turned away from him, addressing Nicholas. "Mr. Parr, are the venue contracts clear?" "Crystal clear. All vendor contracts were signed by Ms. Bennett personally. Mrs. Whitford's involvement was never officially documented, making her interference tortious." Marta Keene stepped forward with a stack of envelopes. "These are for the vendors," she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. She began calling names: Pemberton Florals, Premier Catering, Savannah Strings Quartet. One by one, vendors or their representatives came forward. Inside each envelope was a simple statement: "You are released from any verbal agreements or threats made by Eleanor Whitford. Your contracts with Laurel Bennett stand as written. Payment will be made in full from escrow by 5 p.m. today." The relief on their faces was palpable. "Mrs." Pemberton actually sobbed. Eleanor found her voice, shrill and desperate. "You think you've won. You think you can destroy the Whitford name. We've been here for 6 generations, and you'll still be here tomorrow," I said calmly, "just with less power to hurt people." I walked closer to Graham, though still maintaining distance. This needed to be said publicly, with witnesses. "Graham, I'm giving you one chance. Right now. Choose me. Choose boundaries. Choose freedom from this toxic control. We can walk out together, start fresh, build something real without your mother's manipulation." The entire venue held its breath. Graham looked at me, then at his mother, then back at me. For a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with flicker in his eyes, the one who'd quoted poetry, who'd designed that reading nook, who'd promised we were partners. Then Eleanor grabbed his hand. "Graham, sweetheart, family." "Family stands together," he repeated, the words automatic, programmed. "Laurel, you don't understand. The business, the connections, the obligations. I understand you're choosing your mother's money over our life together. It's not about money. Then leave with me, right now. No prenup, no family fortune, just us." His silence was answer enough. I nodded, unsurprised but still feeling the sting. "Then we're done." I raised the microphone one more time, my voice carrying clear and strong. "I, Laurel Bennett, formally withdraw my consent to proceed with this marriage. No license has been signed. No ceremony has been completed. Under Georgia law, this is not and will never be a legal union." The crowd erupted again. Legal minds in the audience were already parsing the implications. Society gossips were typing furiously on their phones. The photographer kept shooting, documenting history. "Furthermore, I continued. All wedding expenses paid by the Bennett family are withdrawn effective immediately. Vendors will be paid directly from my personal escrow account, established specifically for this purpose. Any attempts by the Whitford family to interfere with these payments will be considered further tortious interference. Eleanor struggled to her feet. You can't, the deposits, the contracts, are all in my name. As I'm sure your lawyer will explain, you have no standing. I paused, then delivered the final blow. Oh, and Eleanor, that prenup you tried to force on me, the one with the NDA, I never signed it, which means I'm free to discuss every single detail of your family's business with whoever I choose. Her face went gray. The IRS investigation would be bad enough, but the social destruction, having all of Savannah know exactly what she'd done, that was the real punishment for someone like Eleanor. Security, Marta called out. 2 uniformed guards appeared. Please ensure Miss Bennett has safe passage to her vehicle, and please prevent any unwanted contact from any party. The guards positioned themselves strategically, creating a buffer zone around me. Professional, visible, making a statement. I handed the microphone back to Reverend Michaels, who took it like it might explode. Then I turned to address the room one last time, projecting my voice without amplification. To those who came here as true friends, I apologize for this disruption. To those who enabled Eleanor's behavior, who knew what she was and said nothing, you're complicit. And to anyone who thinks about retaliating against the vendors who stood up to her, remember, we have evidence, we have lawyers, and we have nothing left to lose. I began walking toward the exit, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. Behind me, I heard Graham's voice, weak and pleading. Laurel, wait, we can fix this. We can— No, I said without turning. Your mother holds the pen. Remember, let her fix it. The walk to the exit felt both eternal and instant. Security flanked me as I moved through the parted crowd, my heels clicking against the reclaimed hardwood with metronomic precision. Behind me, chaos erupted in waves, Eleanor shrieking about lawsuits, Graham pleading for reason, guests frantically calling their lawyers and publicists. At the gift table by the door, I stopped. There, precisely placed, was the sealed envelope I'd prepared that morning. I picked it up, holding it high enough for everyone to see. For the Whitford guests, I announced, a summary of today's revelations, prepared by my attorney. Facts only, all documented. What you do with this information is your choice. I set it back down, knowing that within minutes, someone would open it, copies would be made, and by evening, all of Savannah would know the truth about Eleanor Whitford. Marta appeared beside me with my emergency bag, the one I'd stashed yesterday containing my passport, laptop, and the backup drives with all our evidence. Your car is waiting, she said quietly. Alma confirms she's captured everything Eleanor's rant is particularly damaging to any defamation defense she might try. I pulled out 5 envelopes from the bag, each containing a check. For you and the staff. Hazard pay. Thank you for everything. She squeezed my hand. It was my absolute pleasure. As I reached the door, I turned for one final look. The projector still displayed the evidence summary. Eleanor was on her phone, presumably with her lawyer, her face alternating between rage and panic. Graham stood alone at the altar, looking lost, a 32-year-old man who'd never learned to exist without his mother's control. And then I saw my parents. My father still held my grandmother's ruined veil, his jaw set with quiet pride. My mother was actually smiling, not sadly, but with genuine joy. She mouthed 2 words, "Well done." Devon's voice came through the speaker system one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, the bar remains open, paid in full by the Bennett family. Please enjoy the reception. Consider it a celebration of truth over tradition. I walked out into the Georgia sunshine at 4:53 p.m., breathing deeply for the first time in 6 months. The salt air from the river had never smelled sweeter. In the parking lot, Simone waited by my car, already changed out of her bridesmaid dress. Where to? Airport. I have a flight to Seattle at 8 p.m. The Harbor Line studio is opening a West Coast office. They offered me lead architect 3 weeks ago. You planned that too. I planned everything. I pulled off my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones Eleanor had called charming when worn correctly, and handed them to Simone. Give these to my mom. Tell her I'll call from Seattle. As we drove away, my phone exploded with notifications. Texts, calls, social media alerts, the Savannah Society machine grinding into overdrive. I turned it off without looking. Nicholas would handle any legal responses. Alma would monitor for actionable threats. The vendors had their freedom and their payments. I had my dignity. Simone glanced at me as we merged onto the highway. Any regrets? I thought about Graham, about the life we could have built if he'd had a spine, about the wedding that should have been, with my grandmother's veil intact and joy instead of warfare. No, I said finally. Eleanor was right about one thing: tradition does matter. And sometimes the most important tradition is knowing when to burn the whole thing down and start fresh. What about Graham? He made his choice. He chose to stay in his cage. I watched Savannah disappear in the rearview mirror. Maybe someday he'll realize that his mother's control comes with a price. Maybe he'll find the courage to pay it. But that's not my story anymore. The sun was setting as we reached the airport, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I thought about my grandmother, who'd worn that veil in 1954 when she married a man who respected her enough to stand beside her, not behind his mother. The veil was destroyed, but what it represented: love without manipulation, partnership without control that lived on. At the departure gate, I opened my laptop and found an email from Nicholas. Initial media responses are overwhelming positive toward you. 3 vendors have already inquired about filing their own suits against EW. The IRS has confirmed they're opening an investigation. You did the right thing. I typed back, send me the final invoice. Whatever it costs, it was worth it. As the plane lifted off at 8:15 p.m., I looked down at the lights of Savannah one last time. Somewhere down there, Eleanor Whitford was learning that money could buy many things, but not silence, not submission, and certainly not me. Graham never tried to call. His silence said everything his words never could. 6 months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a piece of my grandmother's veil, a small section that had survived the tear, carefully preserved in tissue paper. A note in my mother's handwriting said she would be proud. I had it framed and hung in my new Seattle office, a reminder that sometimes the best way to honor tradition is to refuse to let anyone tear it apart. Eleanor Whitford's foundation was dissolved 8 months after the wedding. Graham married someone else 2 years later, a quiet ceremony in Charleston. No mention in the society pages. I heard she signed the prenup without reading it. I never went back to Savannah. I never needed to. The revenge was complete, not in the destruction I'd caused, but in the freedom I'd claimed. And that, as Eleanor would say, was a tradition worth keeping. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Laurel's shoes? Your stories and perspectives make this community special. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be anyone's victim.